everybody. Hope you're having a good start to your week so far. All right, today we're going to be live streaming on YouTube and on Facebook. Welcome to everyone who's here with us live right now. By the way, for those of you who are here live, we will be taking questions in the chat. So if you have a question about the topic of today, not about off-topic stuff, but if you've got a question for me or the guest about what we're going to talk about, go ahead and write it in the chat, and near the end, we'll get through as many of those relevant questions as we can. So today, I'm going to be talking with very special guests, personal friend of mine, someone I have actually toured with, Mark Turko. Hey, Mark.
How you doing, Tom Hess?
Oh, very good, buddy. So for those of you who don't know, Mark he owns his own music school, runs his own music school out there in the Northeast of the United States. And among other things, one of his specialties is rhythm guitar and teaching of the rhythm guitar. He plays lead, of course, too. So welcome, Mark. You teach a lot of players in your school, and you've helped a lot of people to become really, really great players. And I wanted to have a conversation with you today about how to master rhythm guitar playing. There's always a lot of talk about lead, and a lot of people talk about lead playing all the time, including myself. But rhythm is what we actually do, right? 95% of the time. And as you know, many guitar students tend to focus most of their time, their playing time, their practice time, and their effort on lead playing. And as a result, here's my first question for you. Do you think that guitar players tend to lack good rhythm guitar skills, maybe because they focus so much on lead guitar?
Absolutely. They definitely spend way more time. I think most people think that it's boring is really the problem. I mean, that would be number one on my list. Also, it could be that the songs that they're learning are rhythmically simple, so they think they're done learning rhythm. And it doesn't mean you need to play above whatever makes you happy. But I think that they think that, okay, I got it. Also, sometimes people really don't take the time to listen to really, really good rhythm guitar players too, as well. They don't even know who to listen to, and it's not their fault. Um, you know, Another reason that they don't is that goes back to the easy song thing that I had mentioned just before. They really can't hear when it's not right. That's a problem that people have too. They think they got it, but they don't. And they don't know what's right, or I should say what's better than what they got going on now. And also that the relationship between rhythm guitar and lead guitar isn't worlds away from each other. They're actually directly connected, but they just don't see that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I've experienced the same thing with students and even just friends of mine that are not students, but that are some of them are really good players. And a lot of what you just talked about, I see as well. And there was a time when I also, years and years ago, also thought kind of similarly to that. And that actually held back my rhythm guitar playing. And at one point, I was a better lead player than a rhythm player. And then when it came time to, play in a band or do something, it was pretty bad because I didn't have the rhythm skills together. So, Mark, why do you suppose so many guitarists are doing the things that you just described? Why are they doing that?
I think the main reason is that their exposure to what rhythm guitar playing is, they've never had the exposure to what good rhythm guitar playing is. So they don't know that they should be focusing more on rhythm. I don't think it's actually really their fault. I don't think they've been made to or forced to really delve into it a little bit deeper, get the good enough kind of attitude going on. But really, that's kind of it. I don't think nobody stressed the importance of rhythm playing to them. Until they usually get to a point where many times where they'll come to me and they say, I need help with my rhythm playing, because they finally realize that the how important it is, and that there is a big gap between their skill level between rhythm playing and lead guitar playing. They don't realize how much more time that they're supposed to be putting into rhythm as well. I think that's really it. I think that's why they're doing it. I don't think they don't know any better. They don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, there's a couple things that I can say here to add to this here, Mark. Things from my own experience, and then things that I've seen, among others. Um, you said they don't know what they don't know, and that described me years ago very perfectly. Um, One of the other things you said was that they haven't been exposed to really great rhythm guitar playing. And in my case, going back to my earlier years, I actually was exposed to a lot of great rhythm guitar playing. The problem for me is I couldn't recognize it. I didn't, when I would listen to Van Halen, I just waited for this. I listened to the song, waited for the solo, and then I paid attention. But, Van Halen in particular, he wasn't my main influence, but he was a guy I listened to. He was a super great rhythm guitar player, totally, underrated rhythm player. And even the other guys that I listened to at the time, mostly rock and metal and stuff back in those years, many of them were really good rhythm players too, but I just never focused on it, never paid attention to it. When I grew up listening to Metallica and I would listen to Kirk Hammett, I didn't really care what James Hetfield was doing. Now it's actually reversed. I would listen to, what the rhythm is happening there, at least in that band anyway. And I didn't realize that. Then the other thing is that I think for a lot of people, and this was the case with me as well, when you come to find out that your rhythm playing isn't on par with maybe where your lead playing is, or it just isn't on par to where you want it to be, it's usually a pretty rude awakening. So for me, it was the very first time back in the early 90s. I was playing in a band and we recorded several songs in a real studio. And, we're paying, at that time, like $100 an hour or something, which is pretty cheap for studio time. But this is, many years ago. And we're there to record the songs, and I laid down my rhythm tracks. And then the engineer who worked there, he said, no, that wasn't quite it. I'm gonna try it again. And I looked at him and was like, what do you mean that wasn't quite it? I think I know my own songs. I wrote it. Well, it was not tight. The rhythm, the palm muting wasn't consistent. The timing wasn't really perfect. There was a little bit of excess noise. The cutoffs, the hits were not real tight. The rests were not crisp. Those are all things he heard, and then he had to point them out to me. And when he isolated the track and listened back, he said, "This is what you sound like." See. And then he picked up the guitar and he recorded it to show me because I wasn't getting it. He said, "This is what it should sound like." And he compared the A beat. And it was like the most humbling and embarrassing. I mean, I'm sitting there with my girlfriend at the time, right? She's sitting on the couch. I'm just getting completely destroyed. I mean, he wasn't trying to be rude or embarrass me. I just felt embarrassed all by myself because it was that bad. So, that's not a situation that anybody wants to be in. That's not where or when or how you want to find out that your rhythm playing isn't where it needs to be. But that's true story. I mean, that actually happened. And it was, let's put it this way. I spent a whole lot more time on rhythm after that and got it all tightened up. But I've had students in a similar situation where they wanted to come and do lead, and I would even tell them this story. But yet they just insisted on just show me how to play the licks, man. Just show me how to rip. That's all they wanted to do sometimes. And they go and play with the band and they, audition or something. They wouldn't get, well, okay, you ready to work on that rhythm playing now? Okay, let's go. So, it's common for the reasons that you say, and I think that a lot of times they don't listen carefully to what's to what really tight rhythm and great rhythm sounds like. And we'll get to this maybe towards the end about what people can do to one, I tell the difference so they really can start to hear it. And how would they know if their playing is really super pro tight or it's not? Some people can't hear it until you point it out in a particular way. And I'll share that at the end if you don't before I do. If you're thinking the same thing that I am, which I don't know. So one more, just a kind of additional related question. Why are people, you've already answered part of this, but why are they spending so much time on lead playing instead of rhythm? One, you mentioned that they weren't exposed to great rhythm playing. You mentioned that maybe they thought it was boring, or maybe that lead playing is more fun. Any other reasons?
Well, I did mention it, but I want to expand on it a little bit. Is that they think that their lead guitar playing and rhythm playing are worlds apart, and that's not true. The arpeggios that they're ripping, that they're learning, are part of chords. You know what I mean? And so it's like, instead of playing it one note at a time, you could be playing small triads and little melodic things with parts of things that you already know, but they're not making that connection. That actually many times it's they're not that lost. Let's just say you're a little bit more of an advanced player and you have some decent fretboard knowledge. You actually already have a lot of the tools to do cool creative rhythm playing if you're going to write your own or make the connection to learning a complicated rhythm. If you understand the key of the song and the chords that are being played and things like that, it's like, well, if you know your scales and arpeggios, then you should probably be able to figure out pretty quickly what they're doing in there. So they think it's just completely foreign, and it's not. Knowledge wise, it's not. I understand it's a different, the mechanics of them are maybe different and stuff, but as far as fretboard knowledge goes, they're very closely related. They don't make
Yeah.
the
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Were you finished with that thought, Mark?
Yeah, I just said they don't make the connection.
Yeah, totally. So, I think the answer to this, my next question for you, has already been implied. The answer's already been implied by what you said, but I'll ask anyway. Do you think guitarists underestimate the power and the importance of rhythm playing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, what I just said, the power is understanding that connection. And when you do understand that connection, I believe that it makes the whole idea of rhythm playing, the concept or the topic, seem much smaller. It doesn't seem like it's this big monumental task that you have to undertake. You don't need to. You're not relearning anything. You're just applying what you already know in a different way, and it makes it seem, well. If it's realized, it'll seem less overwhelming. If they're definitely avoiding getting better at rhythm guitar.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, my next question for you has already been asked in the chat, so I'm going to let him ask it. And that is by Adam. Hello, Adam. Glad you could join us today. Adam asks, question from Mark Turko: who are a few of the top rhythm players you would recommend to check out? Thanks for that question, Adam. What do you say, Mark?
For hard rock, I would definitely say it's Eddie Van Halen because he's just not playing power chords and cowboy chords the whole time. Going back to what I just said, using little triads and variations and 2, 3 note chords, and creating melody lines within just the 2 or 3, 4 mini chord changes. I mean, he's a master at it. He's a master at it. And same thing with I mean, as far as hard rock goes, Hendrix did the same thing. You want to go down the blues route, just listen to Stevie Ray Vaughan. I mean, all these names you've probably heard a million times. You just really need to dig in and listen harder. In the metal world, I mean, Dimebag Darrell is he's really good at that too. It isn't just all power chords. He's doing different stuff. Back in the 80s, Rat, Warren DeMartini, big, really underrated rhythm guitar player. If you really listen to him, you know, in this modern day and age, you can actually just search isolated rhythm guitar part and plug in your favorite band, and it just might be out there on the internet.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned Warren DeMartini, a guitar player that used to be talked about a lot when you and I were, kind of coming up, in the 80s and stuff, growing up with that stuff. You don't hear that name so much anymore. But I'll just another little thing about Warren DeMartini, super great vibrato, particularly for the time. Great phrasing, lead guitar, great vibrato, but yeah, rhythm, really stellar rhythm for the style. The sort of the 80s hard rock metal thing. Van Halen, totally agree on the Van Halen thing. Super great um, rhythm guitar player. Obviously, is with lead as well, but rhythm just super awesome. A couple of, since we're on the hard rock theme here, a couple other names I'll throw out. Malcolm Young
Yep.
from AC/DC. You could put Angus Young in that category too. But Malcolm Young in particular, just simple, but really great. Tony Iommi, Black Sabbath. I wouldn't put Malcolm Young and Tony Iommi in the same category as Van Halen is in terms, or other players that came later, in terms of being able to play super tight, but just the feel is really great. The feel of, and so on the classic rock side, going even older, Jimmy Page, a little more loose in terms of the accuracy, let's put it that way. But there's some great rhythm stuff, particularly for the time, very late 60s and early 70s. And then Hendrix, Little Wing. If you, I know there's probably a lot of Hendrix fans here, but if you listen to Little Wing, that song, if you've never heard the song, go listen to it. And if you want to hear an even cooler, in my opinion, cooler version of that song, listen to the Stevie Ray Vaughan playing Little Wing. Just awesome. On the blues side, we just mentioned Stevie Ray, and I guess Hendrix kind of goes in that category a little bit. Gary Moore, another one in the blues style. He's great, rhythm and lead. On the metals world, you mentioned Dimebag Darrell. That would be one that would come to my mind right away. Zakk Wylde comes to mind, and then Symphony X. Symphony X. We'll talk more about Symphony X a little bit towards the end. I don't want to point something out about that band and things you can learn just by listening in a particular way to that band. So there's a bunch of other great players that aren't mentioned here, but Adam asked, and I was going to ask you anyway, Mark, what you thought some of these cool players. Everybody you mentioned, I already had on my mind as well. So that's great. Next question here for you, Mark. What are some steps that people can take? So everyone who's listening now or who will check out the recording of this later, what are some steps that they can take right now to begin mastering their rhythm guitar playing? What can they do?
The first thing that I would do is, if you're learning anything or you're trying to get better, I would know what your right hand is supposed to do and what your left hand is supposed to do in isolation, and then put them together. I wouldn't just try to just put it together right in the beginning. You could take the time and really figure it out. Many students of mine, many times, it's like, if I just ask them, okay, so what are you doing with your right hand? Like, what is there a pattern, downstrokes, upstrokes? How's that going? They don't know. They don't know. And that's many times part of their problem, not always their problem, but they're kind of doing something different every time with their rhythm hand. So I would encourage people to learn each hand in isolation and then put it together. And it's okay if it's not perfect when you put it together. It's not supposed to be. But when you do put it together, you could focus on most of your attention to whatever hand you're paying attention to, and then focus your attention to your other hand and make sure that's clean. And eventually, the disparity of your left hand being sloppy when you're focusing on your right hand, and vice versa. Eventually it'll sort of level out and you'll be better. But the first things first is you need to know what you're doing. You just can't wing it every time. And then if there is a problem, once you have it, let's just say you're 95% of there. If there is a little bit of a problem, identify what the problem is, isolate the problem, fix the problem, zoom in. Don't do the whole thing that takes 25 seconds. Go in and fix that one little section that's only 2 seconds long, and fix it and then reintegrate it. Just don't think doing a whole big long section over and over and over again is going to make you better. It's not. Isolate it, fix it, reintegrate it. And if you are really looking to take it to the next level, and if you got that stuff down that I said, then you need to start real performance simulation. Start stacking the odds against you. And if you could start doing it in crazy situations, too loud, too soft, too bright, too quiet, whatever, and you could still pull it off, well, under normal circumstances, you're going to be a monster.
Yeah, that's great stuff, especially that last piece about preparing for, live performance and things like that. I've got a list of things too. The first one that I would suggest is to focus on how clean your playing is when you're not playing. So what does that mean? That means that if you're playing a song and there's a little break or a stop or a rest, or maybe the start of the song before you play it, or the very end when the last chord cuts off, all of that stuff, when the guitar is supposed to be dead quiet, needs to be dead quiet. Okay. Even if it's just for a, 1/4 note somewhere in the middle of the song, that excess string noise, hearing squeaks as you move your hand, covering the strings or whatever, getting that stuff under control will do a lot to increase the perception of your rhythm playing, even though your rhythm playing hasn't changed at all. But this is still part of it, just getting control over the guitar when you don't want it to make any noise. So particularly for rock and metal players that use a lot of distortion, if the gain is on 10, it's hard to control the guitar because there's distortion compresses noise and makes it really loud. So you got to deal with that in several ways. So of course you can go and reach your guitar if there's time, and if it's close enough, if it's accessible, you go reach your volume knob and turn it off. But there's not always time to do that. And quick hits in between, you can't go turning the guitar off and back on. There's not always time for that. So you've got to have everything totally tight so that when the band or you are supposed to stop, it's crisp, crystal clear, no sound whatsoever. That's the very first thing that I would suggest people to focus on, is that, because it's a little easier and it's something you can do immediately to start practicing than, let's say, working on playing a little bit more in time, which naturally is also important. But if you play the whole song in time and you're supposed to be quiet and we hear noise, it's all ruined. It all just got destroyed. Okay. So, let's fix this. It's the easiest piece to fix, but you have to really focus on it. So when you come to mute the guitar with either hand, the hands have to come straight down on the string. So if it comes at any angle, comes like this, or comes down like this, or like, if your hand's going this way or this way, in terms of coming down in the guitar to mute the strings, it's going to make noise every single time. The same thing is true when your hands come off the guitar. So you've got the guitar muted, you're muting the strings, and now you're going to put your hands in position to start playing the first chord or the riff or the solo or whatever. The hands have to come straight off, unless you're going to do like a slide or something. But the right hand has to come straight off, up and away, and then you go put it in position where you want it to be. If you come at an angle in either direction, you're going to hear the squeak, and it doesn't sound good. So for live playing, that's something that you can do. The next thing is to listen to what really, truly great, tight rhythm players and tight bands sound like. Okay. And here's how you can do this best. If you listen, I mentioned Symphony X earlier. If you have any, go listen to Symphony X. That's first. Second, listen in headphones. This is very important because if you don't listen to this in headphones, you'll miss, or you probably will miss, the thing that you need to listen for. So if you don't know, almost all bands double track the rhythm guitar parts. So that means when you hear a song, the rhythm guitar player or whoever's playing the rhythm doesn't just record the rhythm part once and then put it on the album that you're listening to. It's usually recorded twice, sometimes even 4 times. Okay. So it's either double tracked or quad tracked. So they record the rhythm part and they put it usually all the way to the left speaker only. Then they record it again and put it all the way in the right speaker only. Okay. And here's how you know if it's perfection. When you listen in headphones, if your attention goes to one speaker or the other for a split second when the same part is being played in both speakers, one of those 2 guitar parts is out of time. When you can't hear any difference, it's perfection. Both guitars are exactly in sync with each other. So when you are recording, if you want to see how tight your rhythm playing really is, this is how to do it. Record something, just get a, simple drum beat or a backing track or whatever. Record a rhythm guitar part. Take that signal and pan it all the way to the left speaker. Then go back and record the same part again on another track. Put that one on the other speaker. Then get your headphones and listen. If you hear your attention going to one speaker or the other, you know it's not tight, and one or both guitar parts is out of time, or it's somehow out of sync. Okay, so the way to, if you want to be a pro, okay, if you want to make real albums and be a pro, this is what has to happen. You have to be able to record guitar parts, put it in one speaker, double track it, put it in the other speaker, listen to it in headphones, and hear. Your brain should never go to one speaker or the other. It should be perfection. If you can do that, there is a demand for your skills in the music industry, because very few people, even some very well-known guitar players, okay, that Mark and I know personally, cannot do that. And that means someone else comes in to record those rhythm parts. This happens way more often than you would imagine. So there's somebody behind the scenes who's coming in to lay down those tracks. Okay. So it's a skill that anyone can develop. Anyone listening to us right now can develop this skill. Most people don't spend the time to develop that skill because they're wanting to do the solos, which is cool. We like solos too. Okay. But there's always going to be a demand for people who can play dead on perfect double tracking or quad tracking. You will always be in demand somewhere. Okay, it's a really rare skill to do that super tight. But that's kind of a great way to listen to what great rhythm tight guitar parts sound like. And it's also a great way to test yourself. And when you do it the first time or the first 10 or the first 100 times, you might be frustrated. You might realize, oh, my rhythm guitar skills are not as good as I thought that they were. And you might even start to feel bad about your guitar. If that happens to you, you know what that means? It means you are a human being and you're normal like everybody else. And now that you identify that, now you want to go and work on that skill. You know exactly what to do, how to test it, and you work to refine that. I would suggest working with a teacher to help you refine it faster. But either way, this is how to refine it. Okay, this is how to test it, I should say. It's not only how to refine it, but that's how you would test to ensure. Okay. Next thing is, use the metronome. Use the metronome. This will help you with general timing. When you practice rhythm or lead with the metronome, assuming that the guitar volume is approximately the same as the metronome, the way that you know that you are playing perfectly tight is you won't hear the metronome when you play. Because the guitar, the notes or the chord or the riff will line up perfectly with that metronome, and the metronome will appear to have disappeared. If you can still hear it, that means you're hearing the metronome before your chord, or you're hearing the metronome after your chord, but you're not hearing them exactly at the same time. So that is a good way to, without recording, to work on and practice. That's the goal. Make the metronome disappear. I will tell you it's not easy and it takes time. There are things you can do that are beyond the time that we have right now to get into, but there are things you can do to develop that skill further. But that's essentially step one, okay, is with the metronome, try and make it disappear, okay? Let's see, what else here was I going to say? Oh, syncopation. Some music has accents off the beat. So you're not always playing on the beat, but you're maybe playing in between the beats. For many people, this is difficult. If this is new to you, it's difficult to accent notes or even to play notes off the beat when there's maybe a rest or something on the beat. That's one level higher in sophistication to work on syncopation, but it happens a lot in songs. So working on being able to do that and counting slow and taking it slow is really important. A lot of times, guitar students, and Mark, you can jump in anytime. I find that a lot of my guitar students want to just play by feel.
Yeah, no. That brings me back to what I said before. You got to know what each hand is supposed to do and then put it together. I mean, that's when I asked the question, well, what are you doing with your right hand? Oh, I don't know. Well, you should know, first of all, because how are you supposed to replicate this every time? And that's that whole, I want to play by feel. That don't work.
Yeah. When I hear I want to play by feel, what that usually is communicating to me is, please don't make me do any counting.
Yeah.
Please don't ask me to count out the rhythm, 1 and 2 and 4, don't make me do that, please, because I don't want to count, because I can't count and I don't know how to do this. Just play it for me a few times. I'll get it, man. Well, no, even if you copy what I do, you still don't got it because you have no idea which beat you're playing on.
Yeah.
You don't know if you're playing on the end of 2 or the end of 4. You don't know if you're playing on 3 or the E of 2. You don't know.
Yeah, and which body mechanics are supposed to line up with those beats or ups and downs and whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to know what you're doing.
Yeah, the people who really learn to play by feel learns to count. I mean, that's the fastest way to get to the point of being able to play things by feel and knowing what you're doing is by counting. Now, when you're playing for real, you don't want to be sitting on stage or in a studio or even at home or whatever, counting things out, right? And when I play, I don't sit there and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4. When I'm in 7/8 time, I don't want to do that. I don't need to do that anymore because I can fluently play in 7/8 or 11/8 or whatever. But that's only because when I couldn't do those things, the teacher I had forced me to count it out, and I couldn't do it for a while. And we kept working on it. And if had he not taken me through that process, I don't know if I ever would have gotten it. But it's hard to, if you want to play in 15, 16 times, not most people don't, but anything crazy like, or even really syncopated 4/4, it can be difficult to do that if you don't know where the accents are. And as Mark said, what's happening in those moments. So it might sound boring or like, oh, geez, I thought I was finished with school. I'm going to go back to, this is like going back to school all over again. If you want to play by feel, learn to count, because once you do, you'll never have to count again.
I was just gonna say the same thing. It's once you cross that invisible line, you just know it, and you don't even have to think about it anymore. If somebody were to ask you, it would very quickly could you be like, okay, well, where was that again? Oh, that's right where that was. But that's the good thing. Once you know it, you know it. It's not this thing that you have to constantly be always working on or have in the front of your mind. No, it's the opposite. Once you know it, it's actually the furthest thing from your mind, but you can execute it without thinking.
Yeah, because you internalize these things, and it also makes it super easy to communicate with someone else, another guitar player, a drummer, for example. I mean, if you're playing by feel and your drummer's playing by feel, how are the two of you going to communicate anything? Well, I
No,
don't know, man. Just feel this. It's very inefficient way to do things.
that's a sloppy sounding band without me even hearing them.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And
It's not a good recipe.
yeah, the first time that I was touring, this is before you and I met, Mark. The first time I was touring, you know, during the rehearsals, we had rehearsals for 2 days, and then that was it. Our producer had said, he said to us, "Do you know what makes a great pro band sound like a great pro band?" And we're all looking at him like, I don't know, everybody's good and the songs are good. He says, no, it's when the band is super tight. It doesn't matter what they're playing,
Mhm.
but how tight the band is together, rhythmically, timing wise, which includes like what I talked about in the beginning of muting and keeping everything quiet when you're supposed to be quiet and all of those. It's more than just timing. um, he said that's what makes a great band a great band. And that's what makes other bands that have very talented players, the singer can sing, got a big range, and the guitar player rips all over, but the band sucks.
Yep.
That's why they suck. So, and he pointed this out. I won't mention the bands that he mentioned because they're bands that you guys, most of you know, good and bad, but he was absolutely right. And that's the only thing that we really worked on was just on those 2 days before we went on a tour for the first time. Um, was and by the way, the band members had not, most of us hadn't met before. So I mean, I flew out to New York and I'm meeting these guys for the first time ever. Okay. And then we're going to go on tour 2 days later, which is what happened 3 days later. So anyway, tightness was the only thing that we focused on, and it made all the difference. Anyway, let's see. As long as we're talking about performing, I know not everyone here is a performer or wants to perform. Some people just, just want to play for fun, and that's totally cool too. But even if you're playing for fun and you have anyone listening, your friends, your family, you're on your backyard patio playing for the neighbors, whatever it is, you know, people can experience a lot of adrenaline when there's an audience, no matter how big or small the audience. You could be 10 people, it could be 10,000. The adrenaline is basically the same. Okay. In fact, playing for 10, the adrenaline can be even higher because you actually can feel more nervous playing in front of a small group than playing in front of a big mass of people where you don't even see anybody, because the people in the first row are like 30 feet ahead of you because there's all this stuff between you and them. Anyway, the point is that when adrenaline gets out of control, because you're not because you're nervous, but because you're just super excited to be performing or playing, it can have an effect just like stage fright or nervousness does, and make you forget all the skills you have and play sloppy, not play in time, not listen. And I got to be honest, this was what happened to me. I've never been nervous playing on stage, no matter who was there, who was in the audience, how big the audience was, what country I was in. But the adrenaline was the thing that got me get so excited. And then you make stupid, silly mistakes that you would never make, when rehearsing, because you're so excited. So when you're practicing and you're on your own, it's important to know, if you imagine yourself performing in front of others, even family or whatever, what are you experiencing inside? Are you feeling nervous, or are you feeling excited? If you're feeling nervous and it gets out of control, your rhythm playing is going to suffer. If you're feeling, all the playing is going to suffer. If you're feeling lots of adrenaline and gets out of control, it's exactly the same thing. So we're a little bit drifting a little bit from talking about rhythm guitar playing, but since rhythm is what we do most of the time, these things tend to affect that. What do you think about practicing rhythm with effects on, Mark? Reverb,
No,
delay, chorus.
not a good idea. I would go as dry as you could go. If you need to play with some type of overdrive to make it resemble, I would actually be conservative, even if that's not the tone you would use. Enough overdrive to create noise, to control the noise, but not so much where it starts becoming like masking problems. So, playing clean is good too. That's something you should be doing as well. Not only should you be playing with overdrive if the part calls for overdrive or distortion, but you should also be doing that clean as well. So if there is overdrive, be conservative, enough to make noise to control it, but not enough to mask mistakes. And then also, I guess it depends what kind of player you are, but 20% of the time isn't a bad amount of time to practice something clean if you do typically use overdrive.
Yeah,
It reveals a lot.
yeah, I agree. And one of the things that it reveals is inconsistent pick attack or articulation. So when you've got a lot of distortion or overdrive on, because that compresses the sound, if you hit the strings lightly or you hit the strings hard, there's only a very narrow difference in volume that you experience when you listen out the amp, especially at high volumes with a lot of gain on. But when you play clean, whether plugged in or not, if you play a note and you don't hit it with enough attack, you really hear it because it's wimpy and it's quiet. And then the next chord or what next note, you're totally pounded hard. Now it's really loud, not out of control. So by practicing the rhythms on a clean tone, or at least very, very little gain, some of the time, it will expose to you mistakes and inconsistencies and errors in pick attack and in articulation. And on one hand, I'll tell you right now, you're not going to like it. You're not going to like what you hear. And it's probably going to make you feel bad. Okay. Trust me. I've been there. I know. Okay. Because you think, yeah, I got these parts down. I can play this song. I can play this stuff. And then you play it on a clean tone and it's like loud, quiet, medium, quiet, loud. It just sucks. And you're like, I can't believe it sounds this bad. Let's turn the gain back on. Oh, sounds better now. Well, to an untrained ear, it sounds better because everything's compressed. But for if you can really hear the difference of quiet sounds being compressed versus this on the strings, then yeah, you hear all that inconsistencies too. You just hear it less, but it's there. So practicing on a clean tone at least part of the time will help you to identify what and where those type of articulation inconsistencies or mistakes are happening. And then okay, I need to work on this a bit. And you practice it a little bit, it'll get a little better. You turn the gain on, and all of a sudden, everything is better now. It may not be 100% better. You may need to practice it more, but it's a lot better than it was before you went to the clean tone. So, and by the way, that advice is really good for rhythm and lead. But I don't advise, and I know Mark didn't because he mentioned like 20% of the time, whatever. Don't practice on the lead tone or lead sound, clean sound only, because there are advantages to also playing with the gain on because that does different things for you. So some of both. Next thing is muting. Muting. So we talked about already when you're covering the strings, but also if you're doing palm muting, if you have not yet played or recorded in a real studio, if and when you do, and you have a producer or an engineer who's got a good ear and who cares enough to tell you the truth, that's one of the things that you're going to hear probably a lot. Muting wasn't consistent. So let's say you're chugging on the open E string, but you're using palm muting. One note's a little bit more muted, another note's a little less muted, and that inconsistency doesn't sound so good. Now, when you play by yourself, you may not pay attention or be listening to or notice that, But you know where you are going to notice it? When you record and put that track in this speaker, and then record the same thing again and put that in this speaker, and then listen. And your ear is going to go nuts because you're going to hear that inconsistency in the muting because it's a different tone. It's not the same. So all of these things might seem like they're small or trivial or little things, but if you want to sound the way that your favorite guitar players sound, assuming your favorite guitar players are good, and I assume that they are, if you want to sound good, these are the kinds of things those guys already do. But they don't, when they're interviewed by whatever metal magazine or whatever rock music magazine or whatever, they're not talking about their palm muting in interviews. They're trying to sell records. Okay, they're not talking about that level of detail. So, and the person interviewing, they don't even know to ask such questions.
Yeah.
Because even if the audience is guitar players, they don't even know to ask this. So these kinds of things are not going to be really discussed openly most of the time. So one other thing that I'll recommend is, take rhythm guitar lessons. If you're taking lessons already and the only thing you're doing is stuff related to lead guitar and everything you do is lead guitar, you might want to do some rhythm stuff too. So I'll let that lie here. Mark, let's, is there anything else that you want to add that we haven't covered so far?
No, the only thing I want to bring to somebody's attention when you were talking about record yourself in one track and listen, and record yourself in another track and listen. If you don't have multi-track recording capabilities, you could do something which is helpful. Is practicing along to the song where you're actually louder. If you're playing a song, you're actually louder than the rest of the music going on, so you could hear yourself really clearly, and kind of compare that to, and almost if you're so loud that if you can stop any place, are you exactly in the right spot of where the song is? And also, even if you wanted to, you don't have multi-track, just you could record yourself with your phone while the music's playing and just listen back to yourself while something else is going on. Anytime you can listen to your own playing, is my point, you're only going to benefit from it. Whether you have multi-track capabilities or not, everybody's got a phone. Anytime you listen to yourself play, you're going to benefit from it, is really the short of it.
Yeah. There's a couple of comments that were made earlier on YouTube. I just want to share because they're pretty good here. George Lynch, known for lead, but has a really great rhythm feel. Totally agree. That's total agreement with that.
Triads in rhythm.
Yep.
It just wasn't pounding away on power chords.
That's right. And then John Schaefer, absolutely. Iced Earth, absolutely killer rhythm. I didn't mention John because there's a bunch of guys we could mention. Iced Earth isn't as well known as, let's say, Pantera and Ozzy, but if in the metal world, you're absolutely right. Super awesome on the rhythm side there. Iced Earth is for sure. So there's a question from Facebook. Let's see here by Jim. Jim writes, should I be using a lot less gain when playing rhythm as compared to soloing? And I always seem to be on the bridge pickup. Your thoughts? I play hard rock metal. Also, how about using delay and muddiness? Well, the delay it creates muddiness. Let me talk about the delay stuff, and then Mark, if you want to talk about the rest, or any of the rest, you can. Delay will add muddiness generally to rhythm playing, but it's not so much the delay that's the problem, although that's part of it, but it's when the delay is not in time with the music. The delay should be in time. This is true with anything, vocal delay. And guys, I've got one of the greatest things ever, and it's free. I'll put it in the chat here. check out this page on my website. You'll have to save the link because it's not so easy to find, but this is a delay and frequency calculator. What this does is if you input a tempo, my website here will tell you where to set the delay so that the delay comes in on a dotted half note, on a dotted quarter note, a dotted eighth note, 16th, 32nd note, a quarter, an eighth, a triplet, all of those things. It will tell you if you want the delay to come in a quarter note after you play, this is the milliseconds to set the delay to. But you need, of course, digital delay for that. Mark, do you want to tackle the other aspects of Jim's question?
Yeah, hold on. I'm bringing that up. All the time I've known you, I've never knew you had that calculator. Believe it or not.
Yeah,
That's cool.
it's a great tool. I use it
That's a
all the
cool.
time for studio stuff.
Yeah, that's very cool, man. Well, using less gain, I believe that's actually a really good idea for training purposes. If you need that much gain to get the kind of womp, if you're doing like some palm muting or something, you don't want to lower the gain and have it sound weak, because you kind of need that palm mute to bloom to get the sound that you want. But as far as training purposes go, yeah, I would definitely advise always just dialing back just a little bit of gain. If typically it's supposed to have a lot of gain, so you really know how, what like you were talking about. Is it me? Am I nailing it, or is it the compression that's bringing it? You know what I mean? Because when you nail it, it sounds better. That's the fact of the matter. So I would always advise people to roll back on the gain for practice purposes, compared to soloing. So I mean, bridge pickup, that's
No brainer.
that's a no brainer. If you're playing rock, you never play on your neck pickup.
Not
You know
for
what I
rhythm.
mean?
Not with
for
distortion on.
Yeah, no, that does sound terrible. So what else did he say? Yeah, well, you answered the delay in money. Yeah, for training purposes, though, I would definitely roll off on your overdrive, and then bring it back up to where it's supposed to be for performance. But
Yeah.
it can't hurt.
Here's another question from David Schramm on YouTube. When should you play with a drum machine and when with a metronome? This is an interesting question. I have a thought on this. But if you want to tackle it, Mark, go ahead.
I think you should play with a drum machine when you can play with a metronome.
Do you mean play with a drum machine when you can play with a drum machine?
No, meaning that you shouldn't be playing with the drum machine unless you can play with the metronome.
So if you have both, use the metronome is what you're saying.
If you have both, make sure that you know how to play with the metronome first before you move on to the drum machine.
Yeah, I would generally agree with that. What I do like about the drum machine is that there are activities happening often off the beats, on the ands of beats or whatever, that wouldn't occur on a metronome. But that makes it more fun. However, when you have a metronome and there's no activity happening in between the beats, it's all you. Okay,
Yes.
so you have to know where that is in here. A drum machine will kind of, if there's a kick drum in there, a hi-hat, it's kind of coaching you along, helping you a lot. But you're kind of locking into all those activities of the rhythmic density happening in between the beats. Where on a metronome, you only got the beat, and you've got to determine, you've got to know where the and or the e or the r or the whatever is between beats. It's a greater test and training tool to play with the metronome. The drum machine's always more fun, always. But metronome is a better teacher. So if you want to get these skills down tighter, try it with the metronome, do the recordings, etc.
Something that I've done with my students, though, I start them off on a metronome and they might be really, really shaky, and then I'll put them on a drum machine. Because of all the other stuff going on, it fills it in and it kind of leads them. And so then it makes sense. And they're actually better because there's more going on. So they could follow a hi-hat now as well as the kick and snare, whatever might be going on. But then I put them back on the metronome and they're actually better because at least they heard something else going on and they were able to. I don't know if it's just confirming that they're doing it the right way with the drum machine. I'm not quite sure. I haven't figured it out, but it seems like metronome, drum machine, back to the metronome.
Yeah.
I see improvement.
Yeah. Good. All right, let's take this one real quick. I think I can answer this real fast. The question is by Son. Hello, Son. I see it's harder to dial a good metal rhythm tone than a good metal lead tone. I mean, tight chugging, palm muting, something like that. So, Son, I think what you might be experiencing is that on a lead tone, okay, let's talk about frequency spectrum really quick. I said I could answer this quickly, and now it's going to be long, okay, but it's going to be good, okay? Here's the frequency spectrum, okay? Here is the frequency spectrum. These are low frequencies. These are super high frequencies, okay? And right here, we'll call this 1K, okay? That's the mid-range frequency. Okay, okay, I realized that you guys couldn't see that. Let me try this again. There we go. We got a kick mark out of here. Now we got it. All right, so the mid-range frequencies cut through the mix, okay? So when you have things that are in the mid-range, they don't tend to sound powerful, but they make the signal much more easily to be heard. Okay. Now, in contrast, if you want that sort of Metallica-like metal sound, okay, what you want is basically something that looks like this. So if you have an EQ, you want to carve some of the mid-range out. Okay, so there'll be more bass. Don't overdo it though, and more on the higher end. But this is typical metal. This is the typical heavy metal guitar tone. Okay, EQ wise, typical. Gain's going to be up pretty healthy. Okay, mid range is going to be scooped out. Okay, you'll see this frequency range a lot. And if you just looked at anyone's EQ rack and they're playing rhythm, it will look. This is a crude drawing, but something like this, where a lead wouldn't look like that because you would have a hard time hearing what the lead is doing. Okay. So I'll tell you a secret. I can't believe I'm going to say this publicly. Super secret stuff. In my opinion, you may have a different opinion. My opinion, the sweet spot, the frequency to boost for lead playing is 630 hertz. That's not quite mid-range. 1K would be over here. 630 would be like over here. This frequency, just bump it like that, and your lead guitar will be able to be heard better without having to turn it up. Okay? So if you ever play gigs and the sound guy is saying, "You're too loud, turn it down," and you're saying, "But I can't hear my solo," just increase that frequency. Sound guy's happy, you're happy. Sounds good. Okay? All right. Good question there. Let's take, I got time for maybe one more here. Let's take this one. Should I learn rhythm direct in guitar, or is it good to get lessons on drumming? I think what he's asking here is, should you learn to play rhythm guitar on guitar, or should you go take drum lessons? Mark, you have any thought on that?
Yeah, I do. You don't need to. That's for sure. What you're going to be learning on drums is learning to play drums. I mean, of course, you'll be learning about timing and time, which is good. And if you could do both, great. But do you need to? No, you don't need to. If you can afford to or you want to, I can't see how it could ever possibly hurt. But you could learn everything you need to know about rhythm for guitar by just playing guitar if you focus on learning what rhythm is and then applying it to guitar, because all drums is learning what rhythm is and then applying it to drums. That's all.
Exactly. And the thing is that rhythm guitar playing is much more than simply rhythm. Rhythm is a big part of it. Playing in time is part of it. Being able to count and then be able to feel That's all part of rhythm guitar playing. But as you remember from the things that we listed earlier, muting, keeping the guitar under control, muting the strings during silence, never going to learn that on drums.
Nope.
You got to have your guitar in your hand for that. So, those are things that the drums aren't going to, the things with consistency of articulation, clean tone versus distortion tone, all that sort, making sure that the articulation is where you want it to be consistent. Never going to learn that playing drums. So could you learn a lot playing drums? Of course, but you could learn basically all that same rhythm stuff on guitar. Plus, you have the additional benefit of all the things you can't learn on drums that you can't need to learn on guitar. You do that with guitar too. So if you put it this way, if you had all the time in the world and you can live forever, and you have more than 24 hours in a day and more than 7 days in a week, and you want to go learn drums for a little extra, great, go learn drums. But if you only have 24 hours in a day and you don't live forever and you've only got 7 days in a week and you can't practice 10 hours a day, stick to the thing that's going to give you the most benefit per minute that you have to put into it. And that's going to be guitar. All right. Very good. Thank you, everybody. Mark. Thank you for your time today and all your expertise and all the great stuff. A lot of great questions from people on Facebook and YouTube. Sorry we couldn't get to them all. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you next time.